Hello, welcome to the support chat on using victims. Today we're going to spend, I would say it's going to maybe a bit short, maybe about 30 minutes, talking about placing victims and some of the more advanced features. We're going to go really from A to Z though, starting with the basics. What you'll see on the screen is our SimsUshare program. We're just going to really get right into it. One of the new features of SimsUshare version 1.5 is putting several new victims in. There's a family, a woman, a man, and two children, a boy and a girl, and also firefighter poses. And we're real grateful to Ryan Pennington for the firefighter pictures, and the family that offered to. We can actually see over here in our help. Just might as well give them a little bit of a plug. The Clute family, which is Chris, Arian, Carter, and Cassidy. So we're going to get right into it. I'm not going to really say why you want to put victims into your scene. That could be fairly obvious. But let me just start out with just putting a victim in. Let me select a photo from the disk. Let's say I've got a basic house photo over here. So the victims are available in a new area here labeled under victims. So I click on victims. We'll be able to see here we've got a boy, firefighter, girl, man, and woman. So let me actually now just put a man victim here. It pops up like every other victim. I'm going to put this victim into the window. Now the first thing you'll notice is he comes out in the in the prone position. That'd be great if we want to have him lying here on the grass, and we can make him bigger or smaller just using the same types of controls. But we can also change his posture by going into the properties and saying posture. This right over here, we can now change it. In each of the victims has different potential postures. We have prone toward camera. You can see there his head is toward us. On his side, crawling, at the window, and we're going to use at the window, or standing. So I'm going to just say at the window. Let's say we're going to put him here. Once we choose that posture, I can move him up. Let's say I'm going to put him into the window over here. Scaling him down, I'm just going to move it right over there. And I'll just add in, let me add in some smoke for effect. Bring that over here. Now you notice the victim is no different from the smoke or fire. You just have, you can change the visual order. You can move him around. He has properties. You delete him. I'm going to move the smoke behind. Let's say it's going to put that smoke just to have a little atmosphere here. Put the smoke behind the victim. Now to use the victims, he basically is they're static pictures, and I'm going to clear the menu. I always like to kind of hide that. The victim basically stays there from the beginning. What you can do if you're saying, okay, let's address that victim, you can actually, by default, click on the victim, and he disappears. So that's useful if you have your students come onto the scene and they say, okay, I see that victim, I'm going to have this rescue unit or whoever address him, he's addressed, and it's all done. If you decide you want to bring that victim back, you just double-click in that area, and he'll come back. Maybe that's part of your critique, or for whatever reason you want to bring him back. So very simple, click, and then double-click to bring him back. Click to get rid of him, double-click to bring him back. Now the victim over here, I'll just make him bigger so you can see some of the general properties that are typical of all victims. There's brightness, because the victim may not be in sunlight. You could maybe in some shadows. You can change the brightness. You can change the blur. And the purpose here is so that your victim might fit a little bit better into pictures that are not so sharp focused, so it doesn't stand out so dramatically, trying to make the picture look a little more realistic. So you can add a certain amount of blur in to fit better with that background. So if I now go back here, let me bring him over there. And if he's already kind of in a dark area of that, I might also hit some of the brightness to sort of darken it down. let's look at some of the other properties. Posture, we already talked about. Now, different victims have different postures. The man and woman pretty much have the same postures. The children have slightly different postures. We'll see here if I add a child, and the firefighters as well. So the boy has the prone posture, has supine, has crawling, and has at window. Now, in crawling, if you wanted to get the boy or the girl or anyone to crawl the opposite direction, you have the general property of the transform, which is flipping horizontal. If I flip horizontal, that can make the victim go the other direction. So I'm going to get rid of the boy at this point. I'll show you now the firefighter just to kind of be thorough. Firefighters here, we have a prone. In his posture, we have supine. We have crawling, and then the firefighter, we also have something special to crawling with the axe. So a couple differences in some of these victims. Get rid of that. So now if we're at the victim as well, just to kind of round it out, you may have also seen here delay timing. We'll talk about that later to bring victims in and out, and also tap control. We're going to talk about that later. That's a more advanced feature of victims. So what we've done so far is we've placed the victim, we've manipulated his or her properties, we've shown how to clear a victim. Now, one thing you may actually notice, let's say we actually have two victims here. I'm going to go and bring a man, and I'll bring a woman here, and I will now change her posture to be, let's say, standing, and now I'm going to put her on the balcony. Actually, let me put her in the window. Right next to, I'm going to change her posture to be at the window, and I'm going to now move her over, let's say, over to this window here. So she's very close to the man there. Let's say she's a little bit, from perspective, a little bit behind the man. So we can make that a little nicer and smaller and appropriate. Now I guess I'm a little bit of a, want to get the details right. I can make her also, let's also change her brightness. It's a little bit darker there. Now, if I go here and I click on her, look, he goes away. But I was just clicking on her. Now if I click on her, she goes away. I can click, have her come back, and I can have him sort of come back. But I have to, it's not quite so obvious what area of the person is actually the clickable area. Well, we can see what area is clickable if we click on a person, like here, victim man, and if we go here to tap control, there's something that says tap target scale. What this will do is now, by default, you'll see when I move this around, that's the area that is clickable on a person. And you can see here that area really intersects with the lady. And if I want to now be much more careful about defining a certain area, I can make that smaller and I can make it bigger. So if I see that it's intersecting, I can make that tap target a little bit, I can make that a little bit smaller and be more specific. So now if I make that one smaller and I click on the lady here, see, I wonder if I'm getting some background noise here. I don't know if that's one of our participants. You may want to just either mute your microphone or just check to see what you can do. So I'm on the victim woman. I'm going to go here and I'm going to change her tap target scale to make it a little more specific just to her. Maybe I'm going to move. I could even move her around a little bit. Now, so once I make the tap target scale not the default, you get that little green box there. So now if I can be more specific. I know I'm clicking on him, and I know I can click on her, and that's really helpful, changing the target scale when you've got victims that are close to each other. Now, if you actually were to use the tap regions, which we'll see once we have another location, it will also show you where those clickable things are. So just a kind of a little bit of a detail. Now, victims, just like anything, like any object, can be masked. So if I were to say, let me put a victim behind the slide here, I could bring out my victim and say, here is, let's say, I'll make a boy over here. So I put the boy, and maybe I'm going to put him behind the slide. Now it actually would be much smaller like that. What I can do, I can click on my mask, utility mask, go here, and really just kind of mask him out. So I click on this, I say which to mask. I'm going to mask victim boy, and I won't change. I could change the contour of the mask, but for right now it should be okay. It's actually much bigger, and we'll actually see now, if we look in detail, you see the boy is sort of more clearly behind the slide. So again, the masks are applied just like to anything. It doesn't really matter if it's victims or if it's smoke and fire. So anyone have any questions at this point about really the basic manipulation? Again, the unmasked part is clickable and double clickable to bring back the victim. Now, let's say that we go inside. So one of the questions might be, if I clear the victim here, is the victim going to be cleared when I get inside? I'm sorry, when I actually return to the outside. So for example, let's now say, let's make I'll just say we're going to go into a hallway, and I'm going to set the background. I'll select a photo from the disk, go here. Now I've got my hallway here, and I'm going to set my navigation. So let's say that for the hallway, I'm going to back out to go back to the initial location. So I just set up from the hallway, going this down arrow will take me back to the initial location. Oh, and I don't have the reciprocal navigation set up, so let me actually turn that on, so that way I'm going to remove this. Let me do that again that way, so when I set it up so the down arrow goes to initial location, reciprocal navigation sets it up so the up arrow will come from initial location back to the hallway. So I can take a look over here and see that. If I switch over into my initial location and I go to set navigation, we'll see that the up arrow is now pointing to the hallway. So if I do that, I can say, okay, let me enter the building, enter the house. I'm in the hallway. Go back. Now, so the point I want to show is if I clear the victim from the outside over here, I don't want that victim to be, I got to get him on the right thing. I don't want him to be there when I come back. So if I click here, and I come back, he's not there. And let me clear her, and I'll clear the boy as well. So when I go to another location, I'm walking around, I'm going inside or whatever, that's an important point, that the victims, as you would expect, are not there anymore. You've cleared them. If you bring them back, then they would be back there as well. So it remembers their presence or not. So that's an important thing. So now that shows you how once you clear them, you're done. Now, you may not want to have the victim show up immediately. Someone shows up here. Let's say that we actually have the smoke going over there. Let me get rid of, for the sake of this, for the sake of just working on this, let me get rid of the female victim here. Let me say that this guy here, let me use the timing to say he's going to fade in. He's going to come in after, let's say, 5 seconds. So you might actually have some type of smoke or fire progression, and only after that it draws it makes the guy go out. Maybe he hears something or whatever. So now it's going to see the person's not there. 5 seconds later, the person shows up at the window. And similarly, you can have that person go away. So I use the fade out for that. So if I click on this person here and I say delay timing fade out, and now I say I clicked on fade out, that brings up my fade out when and my fade out duration. Just a quick recap here. When means how many seconds to start fading the person in. How many seconds should it? So in 5 seconds, that person showed up. The duration is once that when occurs, that 5 seconds, do you want to fade them in from transparent to fully opaque? Now, with people, they really wouldn't fade in, but the option is there anyway. So really, you're going to be focused on fade out and fade in when. So let me fade him out after, let's say, just 7 seconds. So he's only at the window very briefly, 7.6 seconds. Now, just again, a recap here. This slider just goes only to like about 50 or 30 or whatever. If you want him to a number greater than 50, remember, just type in a number over here like 76 or something. So you can get someone to fade out or fade in that's outside that range. But for right now, I'm going to have them fade out about 8 seconds. So we'll see over here in a few seconds, he's going to show up at the window, and a couple seconds later, he's gone. And that's going to be something more natural for a scenario. The victims aren't necessarily going to be there all the time. Now, while we're showing this right here at 5 seconds and 8 seconds, we're showing it at the initial location, our arrival, there's no reason this thing can't be at, let's say, the Charlie side. And if your responders are not at the Charlie side during that time, they're not going to see the victim. If they happen to be at that, let's say on the Charlie side during that time, they'll see the victim. So again, something to consider is that it's great for the officers to do 360s or get people to do 360s, but just doing one 360, let's say when they arrive, may not be really sufficient. You may want to have them go around based on your SOPs or SOGs every couple minutes, or at least get some eyes on different parts of it. And this is a way you can put the victims in and have them respond, have them behave more naturally, that they're only available for a certain part. Anyone have questions about that idea of using timing?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, terrific. So the next step then is saying, okay, let's take this a little bit further. Let's take a look at that tap control to see what we can do. What happens if we want, let's say, in our hallway, I want this guy here to show up in 5 seconds, and then at 8 seconds go away. And let me go to my hallway here, and I'm going to say he's going to show up here. So I'm going to say the man is going to be inside. So we're making a second man, and we're going to say, let's see how, let's actually make him show up inside. Let's see, I'll do it standing for the time being, or let me actually make him on his side. And I'm going to go here, and let's say, for whatever reason, let's say that maybe went to the balcony, and maybe his windows are around there, and I'm going to just bring him down to sort of a more natural size, and let me even just throw in some, let me actually make this a little darker, because it's we're in sort of a darker room there. Let me actually add some blur, and again, just you can go a bit crazy with this stuff. So you want to really try and decide what's the right level, how much time do you really have. You don't want to spend too much time on things that aren't really going to make a real difference. So I'm going to really cut off, use a mask here to mask out his legs. I hit the mask. I say, what am I going to mask? I'm going to mask victim man. And I'm going to say, okay, and the mask boundary is okay. It's blocking out a lot there. So if I go here, there he's cut off. So I don't want him to show up, though, on the floor before he's been at the window. So I'm going to click on him and say, delay timing. Let's fade him in at 8 seconds. So what will happen is if I now, let me go and go back to the initial location, and I'm going to play the scenario. If I go inside, there's no man there. I go back outside, a couple seconds, inside and not there. So you can see we've got kind of the timing right. He gets the window, waves around a little bit, and then comes and collapses on the floor. If I go outside, he's not there. So that's kind of what we want. Anyone can spot something though which we should test to see if it works or not, because we're not exactly there. We've used 2 different men pictures to represent that victim. Anyone want to suggest what might be a problem? Okay, I'll go. Well, let's see what happens if I reset this scenario, and he's out the window here, and now when he shows the window, great, I'm going to get him. I address him, click on him. So great, now I handled that. But now I got my crews and they go inside. Uh-oh, he's still there. So I cleared him outside, but he's still showing up inside. And that's, again, it's a more sophisticated use of victims, but it's an important one. especially if maybe this victim doesn't just collapse here. Maybe this victim spends 15 seconds here and then goes to another room to spend 20 seconds. So we really need the ability to kind of link the victims together so that if you clear him in one place, that he doesn't just automatically show up in other places. So if I go back here, I don't remember exactly. I can't really bring him back because he's already faded out over there. So that with the fade in, fade out, that's still going to be dictated by your timing. And so you're not going to be able to bring him back if the time is if the time is passed. Of course, if I reset the scenario, now he'll show up in his 5 seconds. So we've thought about that. There he is in 5 seconds. We've thought about how do you link things together, and that's the more advanced feature which you see in the tap control settings. So if I click over here and say tap control, you'll see it. Let's talk a moment about these. We already saw tap target scale. That was to really get, and you can expand that to get it so for clicking on them. Let's also look at clear on tap. Let's say that you don't want someone to be able to click and have them cleared. Clear on tap means when I tap on the person, they disappear. But if let's say you don't want the tapping app, you could just set this to be no, in which case you can't. The victim can't be cleared. They're just always going to show up. But let's leave them on clear on tap. I'll just show you what that looks like. Clear on tap. If I go here, and when he shows up in a couple seconds, doesn't matter how hard I tap, he's not going away, or double tap. So you decide. By default, it's set to clear on tap, because by default, you may want to bring the victims in and have them come back. So I'm going to now set clear on tap to be yes. Once I set it to yes, that activates the other control properties. Now, visible on start and sync variables. These are the more advanced uses. Sync variable, imagine the problem that we just had, where we have two men, but we really want them to behave like a single man. So the sync variable, every time you create a victim, it creates a special setting that lets you coordinate the victim with other pictures. So if we looked at it, we dragged two men into separate locations, but we want to now call that the same man. So this victim man 1 sync variable by default gets assigned to what we call man sync 1. But if I look over here, there's also the boy we put in has boy sync 1, and man sync 2 was linked to if we take a look, was linked to the man in the hallway. Let me go over to the hallway and show you this. In the hallway, when I click on the man here and I go tap control sync variable, he's synced to man 2. So they're separate settings. That's why when we click on man 1, or the first one outside, man 2 is okay. But if I go here and set the second guy to man sync 1, so now I'm setting the picture, this other picture, but I'm setting him to the man sync from the A side. And we could do the same thing on the A side, set it to man 2, it doesn't matter. But now, when I actually go and run the scenario, hallway initial location, if I click over here, so what happens, he's visible in a moment, I click on him, which is man sync 1, now the other man is looking at that synchronization from the front side. So if I go in here, he's not in here. And that's what we want. Now I can double click here because we're past the time where he's supposed to fade in. So if I bring him in over here, now certainly he's not going to be at the window there anymore. But the idea is that you can synchronize your pictures. And as you saw here, we could synchronize them if for some reason we could synchronize them to the boy or to the man. I mean, you typically aren't going to want to synchronize across different types, but it is possible. So any questions about that idea of being able to synchronize the pictures?
No, I think it's pretty cool.
Oh, great. That will, we wanted to try and think out as much as how the victims could be used. And so this idea of synchronizing, while it's very subtle, it is a very important point. So that way, what you can do with timing, as you can see, you can have victims show up and move around the house. And you find out if they don't, if the person clears them, if the student clears them, then that will stop. They won't actually make it around to other parts of the house. But if they don't clear them, it'll still respect its fade in, fade out, and just makes for a much more realistic scenario. So the last thing I'm going to show, which in this, is one of the properties called visible on start. So let me actually clear the timing for this, just so that way, we'll go tap control, delay timing. I'm going to fade in, just for the time, I'm going to make it fade in 0. Whoop, let's see. I'm going to fade in 0, and I'm also going to tell him I'm going to get rid of fade out. So at this point, he's going to show up, and I really could clear the person in the hallway as well, the timing, but again, the tapping is active, double tapping brings him back. But let's say I want to create a scenario where I want to create a template almost where I may or may not want to have the victim. So I could actually go here and say, well, I might want to have him, but I'm going to bring him in later if I want. I can go to tap control visible to start. By default, you're putting a victim. You want to see him. But there might be a situation where you want to set up various potential victims. And so if I say visible to start, I say don't, no. You'll see there's a little red circle with a cross through it. I'll make that bigger so you can see what it looks like. And what that basically just says is don't make him visible to start out. So maybe this is an option in your scenario. You're running the scenario. Now you want to throw a curveball. Oh, let me put a victim. So I can just double tap here, and he shows up. So this is a more complex, again, a very subtle use of it. But in this way, you could have various victims and decide whether or not you actually want to have them show up. So if I put a victim over here, let's say I want to have a girl, and I'm going to make her standing, and let's say I'm going to say, oh, let's just add window, and I'm going to shrink that down to be where that is, and that's still, it's way too big. Okay, so I'll make her go down there. But let's say, so I want to have the girl victim. I always want to have the girl victim, but I may not want to have the man victim all the time. And so, okay, they're handling girl. Maybe you don't have enough rescue units or something. I'm going to just say, oh, okay, and now a man shows up. Now, what I mentioned before about seeing where you can tap, when you have multiple locations, you have what's called the tap regions. So if I click on tap regions, we got to hide the navigation window before they become active. Let me hide this window. But if we go to tap regions, you'll see momentarily it shows the different places for the navigation. You can watch a video about our navigation. We have a different video about setting up navigation in tap regions. But you'll also see, if you look very carefully, there's a little green overlay on these victims. And I'll make the victims bigger so you can see that green more clearly. So if I bring this victim up here, and I click Play Sim, now if I show you the tap regions, I gotta clear this guy over here. Now if I show you the tap regions, you'll see it's showing you what that target area for that victim is. Again, a subtle thing, but in case you're trying to click, see, I'm trying to click here, nothing's happening. Now it finally is happening there. So you may just want to check to see, is the region what I'm actually set for? So I can bring that victim in there. Well, that reaches just about 30 minutes. I think more importantly, I've kind of gone over all the concepts about the basic placement, the manipulation, things, whether it's the brightness or whether it's the timing, whether it's the posture, very important. We've gone over clearing the victims, gone over bringing them back in, the idea of the tap regions, being able to tap on them and showing how to change that size. Showed how to mask the victims here, like we're doing over here, masking them just like any other elements, and then getting more involved in the timing and how moving victims around with timing, and then even synchronizing them with those sync variables. So as always, the floor is open for any kind of questions or any kind of comments. I'm happy to answer things, but we can wrap it up pretty quickly.
So, John, the blur. The blur is just basically to kind of blend it in more into the background of the photo. Is that? That's
exactly it. It's just what happened. As we can see here, we saw that if you, let me go over to the hallway, and let me bring this, now notice also actually that this hallway guy has the red circle through him because he's synchronized with the front guy who was hidden. So that was an important sort of coordination. But so, yeah, the blur, the idea, let's imagine here with the, and this is what we see a lot in some other programs, that you bring something in, and if you don't have a blur, it looks kind of weird. It just doesn't fit in.
Place.
And so, and so yeah, that's exactly what it is. We just added that blur to try and make it a little more natural. You know, so to try and you can blur it all as much as possible. Although this is as far as it goes, just to kind of fit it in so it looks like it's really part of the scene.
Right. You could create the, you know, like almost match the tone of the photo that you choose, which is a good feature. It looks like it's there, not like it's, you know, input.
Yeah, and what's important here, like exactly the tone of photo, because as you know in real life, you might, if there was a pile of clothing, this or that, you might miss someone who's in there. I mean, you really should walk into the room, obviously, and take a look. But if you've got something with that blur, which just is like beating you over the head, that this guy shouldn't, is sort of placed on top, it doesn't give you that you know, the more natural kind of, let me look, let me examine, let me see if I can see someone real there. Exactly.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you very much for attending, for questions. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay.